Yakayach Satini, Stakat Johan. Yahana, Chayaku Kinki Chakut Ye de Aya Yejakatune, we Shukwa Aye. Achtuasagu, Ḳaalḳáawu Duchait Ayakachtusa Achi. Lingít Ďátangi Dátawe Yuchakwatan. Gwastakun Tlag. Gwastle Dushu Takshu, he Hinawe Kautusha Hit Duchait. Khatqa. Ya akhuni. Ye awe qaqwas kaya tusai. Tlashana shayawe qitqa. Ḳaalḳáawu qa qannakhwe awashkugan hayu qatam. Qaqwe dikh sati. Tlayat ke awe watuwa akh shadag yuqatangi. Shadag awe ḳaalḳáawu dukak. Tudekhi a qaqwe di. Angun ye hasutian. Ḳaalḳáawu qa ayak awe yequ u. Zantiki ak qan anikak. Wan qanins ha khant awe wugudi. Qa ha inyuq e watan Lingít qinach. Ach tuasagu yisitini yata. Kedeen llatin. Qa kedeen sa ach du yuqatangi. Ya YouTube akak yasane yata. Ḳaalḳáawu du sai awe. Gwallisatin awe naski awe. That's hechosaku asadusak. Kadilcheku at. Ya du late kach open transcript. Gwalli tuasagu yisitini. Oh, ye what ya du Do you katangi away she nach ye kakisatin. Oh, tam tukakwa up. Ya du
Gonna cheese. Yeech teuna teach. Yeescha. Ḳaalḳáawu sin. Ha Christidat. 1922 Ekuchtiti. Hudbe Canarik. Ach liesgoten ḳaalḳáawu. Shit kata hato akhoch. Ach klachandu akut. Kakwa. Kaka. Ach tokasiku. Ach saitu yakewati. Ḳaalḳáawu. Shaan kawakshi kenach dahanch. Kantik it. 1922. Dew tusiku awa. Ha jinakanas hash. Ha kusti. Ha yuqatange. Yitataya yahuan khalqinen yishaq iskuki. Tsukhatu kendaqenan khas age. Yahua khalqina. Akayatiya nayat. Yisisko has khusti. Why take the khatutino church? Hajidach kochla ha khusti. Єяхахвалкина ахтачханкиян ахятки. Йтато ахтуояти тайслассеққуткег ахтуеқиик хааққуссия коннасчиш ииатсатуааг хатса ахуа тайслин гэтқусса Hasta khasiku yes astu akhakaki oye qati chatsir qaqasti Lingít.
What?
Asa yitu jada. Wat Lingít qinach yitu asagu kaya ako. Kekwak e. Itcha tleitcha qinach wujin yuqagachtu tlaat. Hitwasa kakwati. Anybody want to say anything in Lingít before we switch to English?
Do ye yawaka shaklake yukhaytank?
ʻatángi qunnachawe kallaqi.
Shaklake.
Kallaqi.
Shaklake.
Qa shawat shaklaqi. Guta kallaqi.
Shaklake.
Okay, yeah, awa. Okay. Thoughts, questions, reflections. So I wanted to just we had kind of talked about some things before, but it's like once I hit the record button, I wanted to just jump into Lingít for a little bit, tell you about Ḳaalḳáawu. His name in English was Cyril George. He was Ḳaalḳáawu, and he was awesome. He would come to our classes and he would talk with us. He was 92, I think, when we made this recording. He couldn't hear really anything at that point. But Shtiotin Kathy Reddy drove him to Sea Alaska Heritage Institute, where Ishmael Hope and I met him. And we asked questions, and she would write them down, and she would have him look at the questions. And he would look at it and then think. And so we did this 2 days in a row, I think. We did 2 little sessions and recorded maybe 5 total things, which are amazing. And it was Ishmael who asked him, what do Lingít language learners need to hear to stay inspired? And that was his response, which was wonderful. I still got to go in, fix a few things, but I also wanted to show you folks that the videos on YouTube that we're putting subtitles onto, not all of them have subtitles. You are going to find out, if you haven't done this type of work, you are going to find out how much work it is to write down what they're saying and to translate it. I think the people who have done that type of work have ended up with the highest levels of fluency, most of the time. So that is a really good step, but it's also, we'll look later in the semester at some tools that exist to help you do this. However, we did sort of mess around over the last year or so and to see how the YouTube tools are working. The big thing that isn't working is when you select the language for the subtitles, Lingít is not an option, which is not fair. So, I usually, under settings, I'll usually have 3 different sets of subtitles in there. And this is just how I did it. English is actually Lingít above and English below. It's fun because you can see them both at the same time. The difficulty is sometimes the English will gobble up the underline on the bottom swoop of the G. If you go English Canada, that's only Lingít. Because there's no Lingít option. Get it together, YouTube. Now you're watching this. It'll be on YouTube. And then I think English United States, or sometimes it says Great Britain, that's only in English. So whichever ones you want the subtitles in. But the nice thing is on the right-hand side, so we figured out if you push these three little dots here, and I don't know if this works the same way. I'll have to experiment with the methodology on a phone or a tablet. I think this might just be a computer thing. But you can select Open Transcript, and that's how you get this on the right. It pops up, and there's the text. So you can look at it as it's going by. Because sometimes when it's scrolling, you know, there's so much going on, you can't quite read everything fast enough. But you can also go back to particular parts, like you can go right to here, and it goes to that subtitle.
ʼatángi,
And then you could go back and it'll do it again.
ʼatángi.
And it'll play from that point and keep going, but you can pause it and go back. So Chuck Alice Taff has a wonderful project that we're slowly migrating into here that has a whole bunch of videos that have the subtitles already built in them. So the nice thing about using YouTube is you can update the subtitle files really easily. It's easy for people to watch YouTube on their devices. The bad stuff is they steal and sell your data. They probably have your soul somewhere. And there's sometimes advertisements. Like, I got it set so there's no ads. There's no ad revenue on this channel. But there's sometimes if I watch it from another browser, just so I can see what it looks like, it'll show me like Grammarly and a bunch of stuff like that. But, so any thoughts or questions on any of that stuff or on what he said? Oh.
Could we hear it again from the beginning?
Yeah, let's do it one more time.
Quickly, I'm just wondering, recording, because you did the recording, right?
Yes.
And you did the editing and everything?
Yep.
Did you use like Say More and like Elan, or I'm just wondering like.
Oh, yeah,
Edit
yes.
it and like chop it out and do like, because I tried transcribing before and it's really hard. I just wasn't at the level where I could.
I use Elan.
Elan.
And so Elan is, so I'll usually use a camera and then
Audio.
a little clip with the audio on there, go through sort of, clean up the audio a little bit, get it to where I want. If there was anything I needed to cut, I usually don't cut it because I want the whole speech out.
Mhm.
There are times when I've gone through and worked with speakers to publish stuff and they said, cut that out. And I'll cut it out if we're going to publish it.
Yeah.
Then I'll upload it usually to YouTube. And then I'll do one of two things. I'll convert the video to a small version. Because if you're going to work in Elan is basically, well, I'll show you folks what this looks like when you're working on it. So Elan is a program made by linguists. I can never decide if I should say Elan or Elan. There's probably a newer version than this one, but I'm not going to deal with it. So this software is time-aligned software. Let me make this stuff bigger for you folks.
Like that means you have to do the clap in the beginning, hey? And then it'll sync to the clap?
Not really. That's for editing the video itself.
Okay.
So once you're finished with the video, so if you have a camera that's recording and then the audio is going somewhere else, then you should do a clap because then you can line it up.
Mhm.
But ideally, you're going to have a camera that you could plug the microphone straight into, right? And so Andres is a filmmaker, so he can show us doing ʼatángi. But then everything's in the camera and it just syncs itself. So if you got a nice camera, then you can pull like individual audio out of it too and mess around with it. But the video stuff should be totally done by the editing by the time you bring it into Elan. So when I bring it into there, I usually have a smaller version because it does get kind of messed up. Like, I don't know if this video is going to even play.
Hajinaqianas hash.
There it is. So sometimes the video, there's some lag and stuff, but my computer's doing a lot of stuff right now, so it's probably getting overloaded. But basically, you're able to watch them. You can see their speech act as a wave right there. And then
Hajinaqianas hash.
there's some shortcuts like shift. The shortcuts really help. So to just play the thing you selected, you're going to push shift and the space bar. And then that'll just play it. Then you can edit the Lingít on this line and the translation down below it. There's folks who set this stuff up, sometimes pretty different, but we'll take a class time and we'll actually just go over this. We'll take a video, we'll import it into Elon, and then we'll just start the process of going through and practicing. What we'll probably do is everybody's here has like a device basically. So I'll probably have you take turns and enter what you're hearing into the chat. But I'll find one that's not too, Hajinaqianas isn't too bad. But if you get to other things like, let me see, this one.
Ḳaalḳáawu
That's a difficult verb. Just the way he was a really advanced speaker in terms of the types of things that he said. But yeah, these are them.
Cool. Yeah. I like how he speaks a little bit slower. Yeah, because I know some speakers I'm like, oh.
Yeah, there were some, well, like his uncle was Robert Zuboff, who we listened to last week. And I think both of them had this character, not all the time. Sometimes Robert Zuboff would get really excited telling a story, and all of a sudden he's like, blah, 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 going really fast. You're like, what? And then the words are also getting really big. But I think usually they had a really decided pace because I think in their mind they're thinking, I'm going to be teaching people in the future.
Mhm.
And not that other people weren't thinking of that, but they were just talking. And some of them are very, very fast. Let me show you folks one example.
Yeah, Kay, she speaks like she's speaking to a learner.
Uh-huh.
So it's nice and slow, and you can kind of keep up with it. She can speak fast too, though.
So this is, where is it? We'll just listen to a little bit. Just throwing a rock, but she's very fast, and she's also, like, how complicated is the Lingít going to get? Because some of it gets really complicated, and then the speed plays a factor. Let's check it out one more time.
I was curious, that one's freeze frame we have right there. Why does the tuwa have the tuwa?
That's a great question. So this suffix with the, so that is a suffix which means to be at somewhere. But there's kind of about 4 different suffixes that all are at. This one I like to say is at, and it's residing or resting somewhere. And there's a bunch of times that you're going to use this one. So you've probably said Juno Yechatyati and stuff like that. This is the exact same one. It means to be at somewhere. But if it attaches to something with vowel endings, especially if they're long vowels, especially it seems like if they're vowels, sometimes it just goes away. So instead of the you'll get tuwa. So we usually write it like tuwa sagu. But if there's anything that goes in between that, then it'll pop back up.
So it's just there to break the A's?
Well, it's there, but sometimes it gets sort of pushed off. I don't know. I think that's how I'm thinking of it now.
Does it show up because of a yuck?
Yes. So and the other thing that would do if they said, if you said ʼatángi isiku, I want you, so then it would pop up there.
So, but just to clarify, so that is really always there, it just disappears. So it's really the base, sort of the base form.
Yeah. So when you say like, when you have things like, okay, let's say you say it's at Skagway. Skagway yeyeti. But if I were to say in the context of speech, once I've named Skagway and I'm going to say something else, and I'll say it's there. Skagway you do a sakwe on. Yeyeti. So the is this word there, or that place. And so you'll see that pop up quite a bit. But it could be but it's more likely going to be So it just it disappears at certain times. Seems to me like usually at the end of a double A. Okay, let's go through it one more time. Again, you can read, it might be kind of small here on the left, but you can read it there, or on the right, whichever side. And then you can also read the subtitles.
Gonna cheese. Yeach teuna teach. Yischa. Ḳaalḳáawu sin. Hakustidat. 1922 Ekuchtiti. Hudbe Canarik. Achlieskorten. Ḳaalḳáawu. Shitkaadakhado akhoch. Achklachando akut. Ḳaalḳáawu. Ḳaalḳáawu. Achtoikasiku. Achsaitu yakewati. Ḳaalḳáawu. Shaan Ḳaalḳáawu kenachtahanch. Kankikit. 1922. Teutusiku awa. Hajinakanas hash. Hakusti. Hayukatanke. Yitataya yahoan kastinen yishak iskuki. So hatto kan dakenen khas age. Yaho khwaskina. Akayatiya nai at. Yisisko has khusti. Why take the khatino church? Haji dakkhla hash ha khusti. Yaho khwaskina. Achtachkhankiyan akhyatke. Yitato achtu yati. Taisla sekhke achtu qik. Hakusi. Gonashish. Yi iatsato ag. Khatsa. Akhu taisling gitkhusha. Hasta khasiku. Yi ias astu. ʻaqqakaaki iqati tatliq qoqaaqasti Lingít qanarchiis
Okay, any other thoughts on this?
What is the Tequadi Yadi? Or is that his father's people?
Which part was that?
Oh, on the right it says.
Oh yeah, so his father is Tequadi.
And his mother. So his clan is Ḳākāuwu.
Yeah, Tequadi. So usually when I would write down, I would write their Tlingit name, then I'd write their English name, then I'd write their clan, then I'd write their house, then I'd write the Yadi. So their father's people too.
Ḳākāuwu, like Ḳākāina, for there's so many clans here.
The things of Basket Bay.
Ḳākāuwu.
Across the channel from Angoon.
Kone, was learning Satuwu or Tuwa? When he said learning, it looked like Tuwa or Tuwu, but it had the L classifier.
Yeah, so that's actually the verb for teaching someone. So it's interesting because if I were to sort of, and I'm going to edit this again. So sometimes when someone says "gonna cheesh," I will translate that as "thank you," but sometimes they'll say "gonna cheesh yi iwudutle tu yag." I am thankful that you are being taught here. Then this yi to you all. At shetu, technically, I think the subject is sort of falling out of that a little bit. I probably would have expected ye at wudutletu or at wudutletu, but there could be some things going on here. Like it seems like it's being turned into a noun. Like I'm thankful you are being taught there. So I might go back and there's every time I look at this, I find a few things. I'm like, I've got to rethink that one and that one. But yeah, so that's where you get down here to ye has ashtu, that they would teach it to you. I got to edit that one too. So that one has it in there. This one has something. Right? Something is being taught to you there. The teaching of something to you there. So this verb to, that verb root, Toow, from that you get reading, counting, teaching, studying. All four of those come from that one verb. Kind of depends on how it's being used. Okay. I miss him a lot. He really had wonderful things to share. If you want to go see on YouTube, there are, I think, 5 total videos working on sort of transcribing and translating them. Ḳāk, I think, is mostly done. When he tells the Basket Bay story, he actually tells the story of this little beaver who was inventing things. It's a really amazing story. Then he told, there's one called Qishki, or Gishki, which is Bullkelp Bay. And at the beginning of that, I don't think that one's done with the subtitles. I think it starts with these canoe full of guys who see a pod of killer whales fighting a giant octopus, so they get out of the water. And then later at their village, I think this is the one, they had people who would take turns. They'd go up in shifts, they'd go up in pairs. And they would go to this lookout over the village and they would just watch the village. And at one point, so one would sleep and the other watches, then that one sleeps and the other one watches. And so one of them, they both fell asleep. One was supposed to be watching, and he fell asleep. And a dragonfly landed on his head, or his face, maybe. I'll have to listen to it again. And it woke him up, and then he saw that people were coming. So then they ran down and warned everybody that some war party was coming. So that's why they also, in Angun, the Deshitan used the dragonfly. Then he tells about the migration of the ʼatángi, the Deshitan, and the ʼatángi when they go inland during the flood. Then he had this one. And then I think there's one other version perhaps of Basket Bay, and those were the stories. Oh, also ʼatángi. He has a different version than the one that's told in Sitka, which I always think is fun as well. Like, not every story is told the same way by every person. Some have pretty dramatic differences, but this is a story of a young man who was snaring seagulls on the beach. We'll look at a version of this. Like, we've got a really great sort of boiled down version. So one of the things we've been trying to do is to take some of these really big stories that are big 10-minute ones with lots of verbs, are very challenging. But then we're trying to boil it down to like a 20-sentence version. And then so that we can build up like a 40-sentence version and a 100-sentence version, and then give people the whole big thing. But this young man was snaring seagulls, and his mother yelled at his mom, "I'm hungry, give me some food." So she brought him some food. And if you making what we call ʼawash, which is salmon strips that hang down like this, and the top part sometimes gets a little moldy. And also, if you're hanging fish for nayadi, there's this part we call shanya, which is just between, like, say I was a fish, and then here's the gills. You cut along the gills, and you cut under, then there's this little sort of jaw thing. It's called the shanya. And right in between it, there's this little chunk of fat in a fish head. It's called nuchi. And those are delicious. And she brought him some of that. It's like a bug that's just randomly flew by. she brought him that, and it was it's got a little sour taste sometimes on the end, especially if it just drip off of that one side or that top part. And so he said, "Why always bring me the moldy end?" And he threw it. And because he did that, which we call shagas, the thing you don't do, then the jinnaha came down on him, which is the energy that comes back when you do the things you're not supposed to do. And the salmon, well, they took him. So we'll look at that story too. It's a great one. It's usually called Shanyakutlach or Agtatsin. Those are the stories we documented with Ḳaalḳáawu. Anything else? Thoughts, questions?
Is there any stories that kind of talk about global warming, but more in like an indigenous kind of lens? Because I was asked to do it for a project for a thing like way back, like a year ago, and I was talking to the elders in Daisling Kwan, and they were like, well, there wasn't really global warming happening back then.
Yeah.
And so, but I was just wondering from here, is there any that kind of like, not speak directly to it, but that it was happening around them?
We have recordings of conversations about global warming. So there's one that Alice Taff has between Qoneotih Marsha Hodge and Ḳaalḳáawu Evelyn Hodge. And Evelyn, there's a point in it where Evelyn starts talking about things that change. Like there's types of frogs that she doesn't see anymore. And there's other things like indicator species. So that's one. There might be other ones, but the one also, Ḳānāq, is a Shangukedi. He's a speaker from Yakutat, lives here in town. And he made a recording where he was talking about in Yakutat, people go to get certain things and they notice a couple things, that the terns, which lay their eggs near the riverbank, and they don't really use a nest, really. They make their own little nest in the rocks because if you ever found a tern egg, and then you go to grab your friend to go show them, like you come back and you usually won't find them because it just looks like a little rock. And so it's so hard to find them again, I think, unless you sort of mark them, I guess. But the terns will go crazy if you start going near the riverbanks, which they should. Like, what are you doing? Those are my babies. But they noticed like there's this, they would always be in the same spot, but they were way further up the river. And they're like, that's weird. And then they'd go out to this little island where they'd gather seagull eggs. And when they went out there, there was no seagull nests. The seagulls were nesting on the land instead of this little island where they usually do. It's like, that's also weird. Then that summer, they had these huge storms which like annihilated this island. It would have wiped out all those seagull nests. And then the water rose up way high, and it would have flooded out where those terns were. So the birds already knew it was going to be a rough summer. So that was really pretty amazing.
Wow, that is amazing.
And I think Alice Taff has that one as well.
YouTube, Gusue?
What's that?
Gusue, where is it?
Yeah.
YouTube?
It might not be up there yet. So that's a good question. So there is this conversations playlist. I don't think we're quite there yet. It might be this one. You know what? It might be this one. You might find this one with Marcia Hodge. And I'll talk to Alice about the other ones. Because we started putting them up on this one, and then we said, well, let's not get them all confused, and we'll create a separate, because there's a whole funding source, and it's her work. And so I want to acknowledge her work and her contribution. So I think there will be a separate YouTube channel, and we'll start batch uploading these, because a lot of these speakers aren't with us anymore. So it's really neat to listen to them. And she's got, I think, probably 100 conversations. Some of them are just incredible.
Can you share your screen just for a second so I can screenshot it?
Oh, I didn't realize. Sometimes I forget that I'm not always doing that. Whoops. But as far as where to find this, if you go to YouTube, let's see, YouTube, and then you put a slash on there, UAS, like this university, ANLS, Alaska Native Languages Studies. That gets you to the channel. And then there's these playlists like elders, there's like 70 videos there. These conversations, eventually this will be a link to the other page, to the other channel. And then beginning, intermediate. Tlingit oral literature was a long time ago. So was Tlingit linguistics. Ugh, I don't want to watch those. Probably wrong about everything in that. So just be if I come in here and be like, yeah, I heard it says, I'm like, no, I was wrong. That guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Yeah.
Is there a way that, like, when we start to do and like speak more in the language, that we can do some recordings of us? Then when we're like awesome in the future and like speaking, we can like look back and then have something to compare it to.
Yeah, that's a really great idea. So there's, I'm just gonna drift
It's really
ahead.
inspiring, I think, to see people and their transformations. It'd be cool to have our own.
I think it's a great idea. And so we can do that, especially as we start thinking about midterm and finals presentations. Like, I'm pretty flexible. Like, I'll come up with an idea, and then sometimes, this has happened before, it'll be late in the semester, and I'll be up late at night. I'll be like, the students should do this. And then I'll write an email like, students, you should do this. And then everyone would go marching towards my office, angry, because there's like 1 week left in the semester. I've got some huge idea that they should. And so one time I parked up here in the parking lot, and I came down, and I just saw this pack of angry students walking towards me. I looked at them, I said, I want my lawyer. So, and then I was like, it's all a negotiation. You're just going to do some cool stuff with the language. But if we wanted to do some stuff, like these, this is a video called ʼatángi. It's really neat. So this was filmed, 2013. Neither of them are with us anymore. On the left is Kingisti, David Katzig. In the middle is Ḳākāawu, John Martin. So a friend of mine named Fred Olson, who's a filmmaker and is a Haida language learner, got in touch with me. He said, I got this project from the Forest Service where I'm trying to get people to talk about the difference between red and yellow cedar. All right. He says, could you find some Tlingit speakers who could talk about this? I said, I could try. When? I was like, tomorrow. So we were doing some work on something. So I asked both, I called them both. I was like, yes, want to do this? They said, yeah, when? I was like, oh, tomorrow. And so you got to I usually try to give a little bit more lead time than that. And we pay them. Always pay your elders. Pay them everything you can. And what was really neat about this video, though, is totally unscripted. So Ḳākāawu is the oldest, but then you also have a Shungukadi male, a Ṭākhdēntān male, and a Llukāk'adi male who's just a young guy. So like, there's a lot of things you can take from this, and there's probably all kinds of errors. All I do is just sit around and make typos all day long. So just have some patience. But this has it as well. I think I only have Lingít and English. Like you pick one or the other. So they said they would do it. So we get together, and there's a bit of a backstory, and I'm getting to the point that made me think of this. But before we started filming, Kingisti was sharing with us that he was driving around this corner to come to UAS right before you come by the lake, and there was a truck and a boat coming right his direction in his lane, and they almost smashed into each other. And he said, I thought I was gonna die. And this was like right before we started filming. And so sometimes like really wild stuff. I'm gonna tell you one more story about what happens when you're filming. And so at the beginning, I was trying to, because I also didn't think they were going to ask me to talk. So the filmmaker, he was really interested in different angles. We set up 2 cameras, and this was right upstairs in a room right up there. And so I started out, usually I like to just talk to them, just to get them and say nice things to them and compliment them and tell them how knowledgeable they are. Sometimes when I'm working with speakers, I'll say, because I've recorded some speakers who people were surprised that they would talk. And I would usually just talk to them a little bit beforehand. And once the camera's going, I'd say, Dasai tu wasaku itchhankiyan hasakaksaku kakaktu akawe hastu ikaktu latu. What do you want for your grandchildren to know? We're going to try and teach it to them. And so, just really trying to frame it like you're talking directly to your future generations. And so I talked to them for a little bit, and then I think Ḳākāawu goes first, and he starts talking about some really great things, and then he points at Kingisti. He's like, okay, now you go. And then he talked. Then he pointed at me. He's like, okay, you go. And I was like, oh, I didn't know I was going to have. So then you can see me stumble through some, and this was 8 years ago. I knew a lot less Tlingit 8 years ago than I do now. I'm still learning every single day. I learn every day. But then there's a record of that, of me trying to sort of hang with these master speakers, right? And so, but then it goes, then I think Kingisti said something else. And so it was really neat to look at turn taking too. Like, how does that work in the language? And then about 2 or 3 years later, maybe, Ḳākāawu was invited down to Vancouver, and then they invited me, so we went down there and did some stuff. And then they said, well, we want to film you as a younger speaker talking to him. And so they filmed us. I don't know where that video is. We did a funny story contest, and so that was a lot of fun. But yeah, I think it's a good idea to film yourself as well, and to use it as a record. There's nothing shameful about not being a great speaker because you're learning. That's the path that you're going on. but then it also becomes a tool for other folks, and it also I think gives people encouragement, because the camera's on and they said talk, so it's like, okay, and just talk. I'll tell you folks about one other, and then we'll get to something else. So we were in Sitka for a language immersion. I had my camera gear and stuff. And there was someone there who's probably a really nice person who was hired by a native health organization to come and take pictures of us for some sort of promotional stuff. She asked if she could, and we said sure. And she had this really cool thing you could hang a backdrop on. And it was hers. So these elders were talking about food and stuff, but I had this idea because two of them were recently widowed. And sometimes there's things in Lingít that people don't like to talk about in public, but I think are important, which was, what do you do when your spouse passes away? So I wanted to capture this, and I was kind of talking to them about it. And we went into this, like, some kind of coach's office in the high school, and it was kind of a junky, messy background. So I ran out, and this person wasn't there that was taking pictures, and I borrowed her backdrop, and I put a button blanket on it. So it looks nice behind our elders. Then we go in, and we're getting ready to start filming, and one of the elders said, my husband came to me in my dreams last night, and he had died not that long before. And she said, and he had a suitcase, and he told me it was time to go, and I thought I was going to die. And then she starts crying, and the other elder starts crying, and I'm crying, and I'm just trying to comfort them. I said, take as much time as you need. And if you don't want to talk about this, we can talk about anything you want to. I don't want you to do anything you're not comfortable doing. And it was super emotional. And I came walking out the door, and this person who came to photograph us was yelling at me because I borrowed her backdrop. And so I was just trying to take care of my elder, so I said, I'm going to take care of you in a second. And then I just went back I got them some tissues or something like that. And I was filming them, and it was this wonderful, wonderful video. They start by just talking about traditional foods. Foods they grew up on, foods they miss, foods that they like to cook, like traditional Lingít food. Then all of a sudden they transition into dealing with the losses of their spouse. And it was a beautiful, wonderful short video. And I was paying attention, and I was loving on them. But in my mind, I was thinking of how I was going to chew this person out who yelled at me in front of everybody while I was taking care of elders. Like, I'm going to say this. I'm going to say this. I don't care who hears it. I'm going to say this. And, I did borrow her stuff. I did. But she was also paid to be there to take care of it. I didn't ruin anything. So I walked out after we got done, and then we sort of decompressed a little bit, and I walked out. And I was in a good mood. I was still going to go chew somebody out. And then that person was very, very sorry. So maybe somebody already did the job. But it's kind of neat to share with you folks like the behind-the-scenes stuff, because you can go watch these videos, and they're just such precious times to make these. And I'm still making them. We've got enough speakers left to keep making recordings like this. Any other thoughts? You guys got the inside scoop and the drama behind the camera?
One last thing, if you're a poor student, how do you go about paying your elders? Like, because they're always willing to record with me and everything like that, but I feel bad that I don't have, like, funds to, like, pay them. And I don't know how to grant write very well. And
Right.
stuff like that.
Can you do things for them?
Yeah, I always bring them meat and fish and give them, like, traditional foods and stuff like that, but sometimes you're like, is this enough? Because you're giving me so much in, like, language and teaching time.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Because the other thing too, like sometimes someone will sponsor your efforts, but then they'll act like they own the content. Because the other thing too, like, it's not always easy. I would go to these elders and I would say, okay, I got this little piece of paper you're going to sign. All it says is I'm going to put this on the internet and we're going to use it to teach people Lingít. And I'm going to pay you $100. And so I pay them $100 per session. And I just say, and so I've got this signature that said, just in case, like, what if they pass away and one of their family members said, I don't want you to have that on the internet. And so it's a pretty tricky thing because it has happened before. But then I'd also, try and make sure that the family receives a copy or it's on the internet so people can see it. But I have had people who've reached out to me and said, you shouldn't put that on the internet. I said, why? They said, because it's a sensitive story. I said, well, that elder told me I could. So maybe go talk to that elder. And if you want to chew someone out, go try it. I'm not trying to advocate for anybody chewing out elders. I'm just trying to say, who are you to tell this elder that they shouldn't do it? Because they said, I want to share this story with the people. This is for the young people. It was made for the young people. That's what he told me. And so we had a bit of an argument about it. But then I just said, you got to go talk to him. He said, it's okay. But I also said, well, if it's super sensitive, then we just don't translate it. It's all in Lingít. So well encoded, like deeply, deeply encoded. But I do think if, like, say you're working in a community, like, could a tribal group just pay the elders so that they can be, so find someone to sponsor. It doesn't have to be a big grant, but I would go to Gold Heritage Foundation. I would go to Douglas Indian Association. I go to Alaska Heritage Institute. I say, pay this elder. And sometimes there are also conversations like this, which is me being creative with the accounting. Because they'd say, well, I was like, you should pay this elder $100 an hour, what they do. And they'd say, well, we pay everybody the same. It's $35 an hour. So then I would go film for an hour, and I'd say, well, I put in 1 hour, because they would pay me for some of this work too. And George worked 3 hours. And they never ask questions about it. But just find ways to get them paid. But these are good questions because not everybody has the money, but we want to make sure that they're getting something for their time. So usually when we do those inland workshops, I go up there for 3 weeks. So I'd work with, before I even got there, I'd work with especially Carcross and Teslin, and I think also Yukon College. But I'd say, okay, pay the elders for the time that they're there. And then, then they would pay me for coming up, which was wonderful. They would have these big workshops with like 30 people for 3 weeks. It was just amazing. And then while we were there, we would film them, and they're already being paid for their time. So, okay. Okay, don't tell on me, even though it's all recorded. I'll deny it. I'll deny it in court. Touchbane will be my lawyer. We have a recording. I was like, is it in Lingít? Then it's not me. Yeah. So I do want to finish the questions and then we'll take our break. I think we left off on, we did that one. We did that one. What kind of question, oops, I just realized something too. There should be one word. What kind of question is a ʼatángi question? ʼatángi. For, yeah, for. And it's a purpose. So in this case, that should be one word. Everybody repeat after me. ʼatángi. What are they looking for? So kushi is a verb to, there's a couple different things. Like as you sort of start to use these verbs a little bit more, like sometimes there's these very specific kind of categories. So the perfective form would be awate would be to find something. Like let's say you're walking up the road and you look down and you find like a key. Like, oh, whose key is this? So uwate or awate would be to find something without really looking for it. Ḳaalḵáawu would be searched for it. So, I couldn't find my key, so I went looking for it. ʼakachkachwashi would be I found my key. So sometimes what's going to come in front of the verb will change to sometimes say whether that thing has happened or not. But then sometimes the verbs are a little bit different. And then there's this verb, there's a clan house called kutishit. And that comes from a verb like you could say, qawqanqaquwatis. They were sitting there looking, it doesn't have to be binoculars, but they were looking for a deer. But that's a different kind of looking for. So like kuwashi would be like, the verb is literally saying like feeling around for it. Kuwatis is like you're staring for something. So it's like you're sitting there watching and looking for something to emerge. So sometimes you're going to have one thing, but you're going to have like a few different categories, depending on what we're talking, like just found it, looking for it, found it when looking for it, and then looking for it with, like looking out for it, I guess, trying to find it, trying to spot it. What type of question is that?
Is that like banach saya?
How is it? No, why? Oh, why?
Not quite. Why? Yes, why? Manach saya would be.
I heard manach saya igach. Why are you crying? Oh.
Yeah, away.
Oh.
Manach saya iqach. We'll say the Teslan version. Manach saya iqach.
Manach saya igach. Oh.
So, like you could just put this in front of a verb. Why are you verbing? Right? And it's just getting a straight like why. Dot yissa for the benefit of what? Dot qasa, going to find something or going after it. And then wanach saya, just why. Okay, so we have dasaway. What is that? So one of the things that the first chapter of Beginning Lingít does when it starts introducing questions, dasaya, what is this? Te away, that's a rock. Dasaway, what is that? Tas, aya, that is, or this is thread. So it's focusing on like a question and answer thing. What is it? It's this. But it's also focusing on ya and we. Ya and we. Right here and over there. So it's kind of what the first chapter does, setting up some of the questions and answers. So the last thing before our break is this term, everybody say, awe. Awe. So it's your Lingít comma, it's a pause, it lets people know you're still speaking or you would like to speak. It's not that long one, awe. That's that like acknowledgement one. But it can also pair up with some other particles to create these things to say to somebody, like conversational stuff, or in certain cases, what you would yell out when someone is talking. So one of them is ye away. Ye away. And I like to think of it as that is how it is. Right? Ayachawe. Ayachawe. That is correct. Day away. Day away. Knock it off. Hooch away. Hooch away. It's all gone. So just sort of like getting the subtle differences between them. There was like a big argument on Facebook about these two, which are not that different. It was intense. I was like, whoa, this argument is serious. But for me, if I were to put these together with something else, right? Like, so if I say ye away, it's an agreement. If I say ayach away, it's an agreement. Like if you're talking, these are two really good ones to say if you really like what someone is saying. Like if someone's giving a Lingít speech in a cultural context, if nobody says anything, it feels like you're just not doing a good job. or nobody's listening to you because they don't love you. Those are the things it really feels like. But if your opposites are saying, yeah, away, ayach, then you feel like you're nailing it. And this is the sort of the back and forth that occurs in Lingít oratory. But also in conversation, just to say, I agree with that, right? Yeah, away. You can put these into, like, what if I did that? Yeah, akwe. What happens?
Is that how it is?
Is that how it is? Right? So for example, if I'm around a Lingít speaker and someone asks me how to say something and I look at the speaker and the speaker obviously doesn't want to answer right now, or they're maybe pointing at me, so I'll say it and I'll say, yeah, akwe. Is that how it is? You could also do, I don't know why that went like that. So you could say, ayachakwe. Is that correct? You can't really do it with the last two. Like, deakwe, that doesn't make any sense. Like, is it being knocked off? Is it stopping? Right? But you could also say, klesh ayach away. That one works. That is incorrect. But there was a bit of a dialogue about, some people will say, ye away means that is correct. I was like, well, that's how it is, and that's correct. There's not a lot of difference between those two things on their own. But if I were to say a phrase, ye away chosaku, and if I said, ayach away chosaku, the difference between those is I would translate the first one, that's how I know it, and I would translate the second one as, I know it correctly. And those are actually pretty big differences. Because if I was telling you a story and I might say, that means that's how I learned it, it's how I was taught. But if I'm wrong, it's not really on me, right? So those types of things.
Is that underlined?
What?
Underlined?
Yeah, I think it's right there.
Oh, that's right. So I always say,
But, okay,
Oh.
we're going to take a break. But before we do, these are good ones to also know, right? As a learner, to be able to say these things. I've been chewed out for saying the wrong one in the wrong situation. So to say, I know it, you'll say, chosaku.
Wasaku.
Chosaku.
Wasaku.
Chosaku.
Wasaku.
And it's like a fact. It's some information. I know that thing. But you folks are no longer beginners, so you must know. When it goes negative, the verb will change. So in this case, si goes to sa, ku goes to ku. Can't just put klesh in front of it and say the verb the same way. It's not going to work. So to say I don't know, klesh chosaku. Klesh chosaku.
Wasaku.
Klesh chosaku. Right? And a similar thing, right? So let's see, this might be a little tricky. It's okay if we don't know. So there I am. We'll put this one over here. I know it. So how would I say, I'll put the English on here. If we can get this right, we can take a break. What if I want to say, they know it?
Wasaku. Ku.
So you can't say that this part has to go. So let's do this. We're going to see what's in front of it. There's a thing there. There's a thing here. There's a thing here. Okay? We stretch it out so we can see what's there to see what we can change. And I'm going to tell you what all these parts are. That's the it. There has to be an it there. It can't go anywhere. It's going to be important when it switches to they. This you thing, that's the thing that turns into an M in car cross when you say like siku. Oops, might have been an answer. Wait, no, you wouldn't say that. Okay, never mind. So, this marker, you. Sometimes when we stretch it out, we're going to write this Y with the two little dots over it. That means this thing might change into a W. This thing might change into a Y. This marker means let's look at the verb strictly in terms of whether or not it did occur. So you have did occur, didn't occur. Which is wild because you say chwasaku and that's like I know it right now. But Lingít doesn't change verbs for time, so it doesn't matter. What do we call them? Chwasyadakan thing. Angry legs, I think we call them. Okay.
Mosquito? Is that a mosquito?
That's a. They call him a mosquito hawk
Mosquito eater.
or a mosquito eater.
I don't think the adults actually eat anything.
I don't think they certainly don't eat mosquitoes. They just hang out until they die because they can't find their way out. Okay. So what is the ch part here? Any
Isn't
guess?
that I?
That is I. This is the thing we need to change, is who is doing the thing. So we're going to actually put this over there so we can see it above the chwasaku. It's a little messy, sorry. So, what do you folks think this is going to change?
Train has it.
You are.
Well, it would be you all. Yih would, or
The
it,
nothing,
yih would be y'all.
nothing.
The third person, so we're saying they, is always an unmarked subject. Every single time. Lingít must do this. I know, you know, knows. Like there's just nothing there. And you got to sort of get used to that because I think a lot of learners want to put something in there. They, in their brain, like their English brain's like, there can't be nothing. But the Lingít brain's like, oh yeah. But, and there's a lot of codes going on in here. This one is the one who does it. But what is this one out here?
It, so would it be ah?
Yes, so this is the object, that's the one the verb happens to, or the one the verb is specifically referring to, and you can't have two zeros in there. So this one is a zero. It means there's nothing there in all cases unless the subject is also a zero, which forces this one to switch to a, or else you wouldn't know it was there. You would just say cha, but it has to be acha. They are eating it. So now we got they know it. We got all the parts there, and we got it in the chat that this will be. Where are you going, thing? Ao se ku.
Renee, don't you use hus sometimes for they plural?
That's a good question. There's a bit of a transition going on here. And we're going to talk about this transition. So if I say ausaku, it does not matter whether that person is male or female. Right? I could just look around, ausaku, 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 ausaku. When the Lingít Verb Dictionary came out in the 70s, this would just always be translated as he knows it. That would just be how it was translated. Somewhere along the line, it starts to shift to he/she or she/he. Some folks pointed out that there's actually no gender in there at all. And so I was like, yeah, that's true. So we're trying to shift to a they so that folks don't have to think about that. But then, like, if you put hus in front of it, I would say they all know it. Now it pluralizes the subject.
Oh boy. Can we use one? Didn't we? I used to remember writing, if you didn't know the gender, you would say, one would say. I can't get the they every time I see they. It's plural. Okay. Ugh. Gonna sheesh.
English is not well equipped to deal with ungendered pronouns or language. Because then you got to say, they are over there. But that's the way you got to say it.
Can you use one? I mean, has anybody talked about that? Because then it's singular. At least you're talking about one person, but you're not saying the gender. Has that ever been a part of the dialogue?
Well, the,
As fourth person, and that's one.
yeah, because Tlingit has, so there's also, okay, I got to do a new slide. Again. So I'll show you why that might not work. And then we'll maybe take a break.
I'm sorry. We don't have to.
No, I'm fine. Okay. I'm going to change this verb just a little bit. So I'm going to say huaha. Anybody know what I did there?
Eating.
I ate it, right? So I ate it. So there, again, if we want to just sort of stretch this thing out, we have 0, y, ha, ya, ha. Those are all the components. It, perfective, I, classifier, eat. I ate it. So I could go down, I could change the object classifier to this. And now this is, I ate some, I don't English well, I ate some of it. Ah-ha-ha. The way we translate this pronoun right here is one or ones or some of them. So this is the one that could be, that's technically, that would work well for one of them. You'd usually put take in front of it. So again, we'll change it a little bit more. So if I put take ah-ha-ha, I ate, what do you think?
None of it?
Take is not plague or place.
I ate one.
I ate one of them.
One of them.
And this stuff is important because we're at a gathering with 8 people. So someone says, how many are going to be there? 8. So they bring 8 delicious donuts. And someone doesn't get one. And they're like, what happened? And I'd say, I only ate one. One me. Someone in here ate 2 donuts, right? So yeah, but those are good questions, and these are things we're still trying to figure out as well. And we do have some language students and speakers who don't identify with a gender binary. They say, I'm not a he or a she. So even if you do she, he, you're kind of leaving me out. Like, oh, all right.
Yeah, in Chinese, it's ta. Ta is he or she. So I think I'm just struggling with the agreement with the verbs. So then are we saying they is? I mean, is that
We're saying they are.
they are, but it's singulars. So the plural verb, I guess I'm just trying to figure out how to know whether you're talking about a singular person or a plural. It used to be the verb told you, but that's not.
Singular Lingít, then it'll
It'll tell you. Goodness, geez.
So if I were to put clash in front of here, that cannot stay the same. Okay? So I'll put our model up here. It's all super messy. It's just kind of on the fly. So anybody remember what it was like when I said I don't know? And you could say ʼkáxáawu if you don't know. I'm just kidding. But how would I spell it?
Well, you switched it to SA, and that's because the classifier, right? It's either it happened or it didn't. So because it's no longer a plus I, because it didn't happen. And it,
And
U in the end.
that goes short. So there's our model. So this cannot be ʼkáxáawu. Here's another inside scoop. And I'll give you the answer because it's a little funky. One time I was at somebody's house and there was this kind of weird thing going on where somebody is talking to someone else, but they're just criticizing young Tlingit speakers. I was getting a little grumpy because it was also the wrong time and place. I won't say more than that. But they were really sort of going off and they said, and they're just talking real loud to their relative. And it was absolutely, okay, I'll just say it. Their sibling had just died. So I went over there to be with the person who passed away because that was a tremendous loss for me. And so someone's there just really talking loud and like trying to just really kind of chew people out about what they're doing. And I thought it was really, we were there to just sort of be with the body. But it's just really going off. ʼkáxáawu, blah, 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 blah. And then my brain goes, ʼkáxáawu, right? But I didn't say anything because I'm not going to engage in that kind of stuff. But there it is. So here you've got w. And what you're going to learn is so when there's an SI in the classifier, it's solid. Nothing in the world is going to punch that I out of there because it marks that the verb happened. But if you change it to an A, and then you're also going to get this little guy here, whoa, and clash in front of it. I'm going to add clash. So there we get it. Now we get this little magic guy. Call it the Irialis. It has a fun name. All that matters is it says verb didn't happen. That's what that U says. Verb didn't happen. And it runs, and a lot of times when these two are together, they just mush on together because they're very similar. The and the U. But the 0 plays no defense. It's like, who's a basketball player that plays no defense? It's like the LA Lakers when they had all those stars on the team, like Karl Malone and Gary Payton, like never played any defense. If you have either of these things right next to a classifier with the letter A in it, they will knock it out of there. Like, get out of here, A. Because of that, you have ʼkáxáawu. 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 So you're going to figure out, there's a whole bunch, and with Lingít, it's like, here's a rule, and then there's this other rule, this other rule, this other rule, and it might be a little overwhelming. But what we're going to do, even though we just sort of ran through a whole bunch of this stuff just for fun, we're going to run through a whole bunch of examples. And you're going to learn how to accurately predict this stuff. It does take time, and it takes a lot of sort of getting them wrong, which is totally fine. Nobody's going to be sitting at the table bawling you out or talking bad about you. They might, but it doesn't matter. What matters is we just continue to sort of figure out what those things are. Oh yeah, this thing has to come in here. This thing must come in every negative form. Anytime there's clash, you're going to get that irialis in there. It's going to pop up. Okay. Should we take 5 minutes? We don't got very much time. Okay, take 5. Take 5. Right after this. I'm just kidding.
Lay on the floor really quick. Let's lie. Not take it.
Yeah, it gets to be.
Time to like absorb.
I know. I was like, wait a second.
What just happened?
We should just throw a whole bunch of like little grammar parts on the floor. People just lay on them. Just absorb them.
No, I'm tired.
Yeah, get some rest. My mom always tells me that one. Ďákváawu Ilsa. Oh, nice. Do you know, does UAS offer like form line classes?
Yes.
Okay, cool. They never even gave me an option to pick any for this. I think it's just because I have to get out math and English out of the way.
Oh, okay.
And then I could take electives hopefully next year.
Nice.
I think Ḳaalḳáawu is teaching there, right?
Yeah. So Ḳaalḳáawu is teaching in the next semester, though. I think Wayne Price will be back.
Oh, sweet.
The roving wing.
Was Herb? It's Herb, right? Yeah. Lingít. What's his Lingít name?
Kuchain?
Kuchain. Yeah. Are you gonna his club's in the morning tomorrow?
I'm gonna go.
You're gonna go?
Yep.
You don't work Fridays?
I do, but flexible.
Yeah, cool. I can't go tomorrow. I'm hoping that they'll be kind of flexible, his group, and the times will change sometimes.
Yeah, I think they were just gonna discuss
Mm-hmm.
the other different times. It sounds like there'll be 2 different ones.
Yeah. I'm gonna email him. Yeah, you should advocate. Monday, Wednesdays, or Fridays.
He was like, if you're taking at least 1 credit, you can join.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, I'll be there, man.
Yeah, I just last week I committed myself to going to the rock dump for driving the UAS.
Oh,
Little bus thing. It's
Oh,
opened up to
awesome.
UAS Friday.
I've been
morning.
thinking that making the rock dump, getting lunch is gonna be an important part of adjusting to the changing season. I feel like
Yeah.
before you can get out on the snow and stuff, and
Yeah.
just have something to move your body.
I just got my seasons passed for Eagle Crest, so I'm pretty hyped.
Nice.
Signed up for some lessons because I'm gonna start hitting jumps this year.
Good.
Yeah, it's gonna.
Last year was so good.
Oh,
It
I
was.
bet.
It was the most unbelievable winter ever.
We had wicked snow
Yeah,
in
there
the
too.
Yukon, with just constant snow the whole winter, and it was really nice snow too. It wasn't
Here too.
really wet.
I mean, here's.
One day I went, it was probably about 4 feet of just straight powder, and I went early enough where I was me and my friends were the first one on the hill
Yeah.
for a solid hour.
I mean, I'm
That's
almost.
my favorite
It's.
time of the year.
It is my favorite too. I mean, I'm almost
Because you
afraid
can
of it
bundle up, right?
because when it happens, nothing else can happen in my life.
I know.
When the snow is falling, there's
Yeah.
one line.
I'm just gonna have to get everything done on Saturdays and just commit every Sunday to make my season's pass
Yes.
worth it.
100%.
Yeah. And luckily they have a bus going up the mountain too,
Oh,
because
that's amazing.
yeah, because I have a little car, so it's kind of sketchy.
Do you ski or you ride?
I ride,
Nice. Okay.
ski, ride,
Ride.
sick. I was gonna say if he skied. No, I just
No,
like to,
this
I
is
like
the
to throw
place.
jigs at skiers.
So I used to ski.
Yeah.
Last was my first year riding a snowboard.
Yeah.
I just switched impulsively.
Yeah.
Because I've done a lot of surfing. I was like, I wonder if I can just snowboard.
Yeah.
I mean, at first it felt weird, but then also here with like the, when there is wet snow, it's nice to have just
The option,
the big
yeah.
board versus like the ski or like.
Yeah, I'm getting a split board for my next semester at outdoor studies, and so I can like climb through and do backcountry stuff and then board down.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
it's
got
sweet.
a split board for the first time last year.
That's cool. I have a trick board, a paddle board, but I
Oh
need
my gosh.
yeah
Hey.
Do some
backcountry
we
stuff.
get backcountry conversations.
20 minutes speed run through the beginning Tlingit chapter. And then, let's see. I gotta think of what we're gonna do over the weekend. I gave you something to do. Think about it. So, Alaska Heritage Institute put out a prayer sheet a while back. It was really nice. I'm not exactly sure who worked on it, but there was a line in here. Aqawe kedengach tutlatin hatatki qahaqusti ha'itkhya hasna ati hastuji. So everybody say Aqawe kedengach tutlatin hatatki qahaqusti ha'itkhya hasna ati hastuji. And the translation's right next door. But before we look at that, what can you recognize? Kusti, hakusti, our way of life, our culture.
ʼatángi, our land.
Our land. Some people would say ha'ani, sounds like our villages. Ha'atki would be like the earth, the soil.
The teen is seeing. The verb is seeing.
The verb is to see with that L classifier. It's watching or watching over. This would be a good verb for protecting, maybe.
Does the ga make it future? No.
Gachtu. So gachtu is we are gonna every time. Gachtu is we are gonna. Gachtu, gachtu, gachtu. Then we'll do this, then we'll do that, then we'll. So all you planners out there, gotta know the gachtu. So gachtu dasa.
ʼākā'away,
And then Kadain, yeah, well or carefully. And then we are going to carefully watch over our land and our way of life. Wonderful. What about ha'it? Ha would be our. It is to follow along after something. Right? Ya hasna'ati a. It's all one chunk.
is that from na'at?
Not from na'at. You gotta have the ya hasna'at. Or sometimes it's a yas na'at. So that is a verb.
Plural to go.
Plural going, right? So the ones following us. Ah, that's what the ah is doing there. There's those ones that we just talked about. The ones who are following us, has do yes,
Their possession.
for their, well,
Benefit.
for their benefit. And yes could also mean gift, to give something. We're going to give it to them so that they could come into their possession, anything like that. It depends how it's being used. If it follows a verb, that means we're verbing that for their benefit. The G is not really hands, it's possession. G, yes. But as far as like verbless stuff, remember we keep sort of, gotta be able to talk without verbs while you figure the verbs out. If you just gave something to someone, like, this isn't even my mug, I just found it in the break room. But if I gave it to someone, G, yes, now that's yours. That's a gift now. But then I might say, someone, like if someone gave this to you, first, like they came, stole my cup, which isn't even mine, and then they gave it to you, or if I said, hey, go give this cup to them, go give this to Ḳaalḳáawu, I want her to have it. So then I had a runner who brought it over, and they might say, Ijiyis chonei jidach. So jidach would be who it comes from. Possession from, possession for. All these things, they love to just stack right up. You'll see a whole bunch of them like that.
So that would be Hune gives this to you.
Yeah. So it's same thing. Like your mom gave you something to give to someone. Ijiyis ʼatángi jidach. This is for you from my mom. So without any verbs, you have communicated this is a gift for you. It's not from me, it's from my mother. You did all of that with ijiyis ʼatángi jidach, like 5 things. So the second edition, which is, I think it's going to be done this weekend. I'm so excited. It's like a big monster thing full of so many errors. So, but maybe there'll be a few less. I know there'll be a few less. One of the things that this does is it includes a lot more detail on how to pull these things apart. And sometimes there's a little bit of back and forth for the things that aren't verbs. When I pull them apart, I show this is what they look like when you take before they smoosh into each other. I do the same thing with the verbs except for the verb root, the stem. I usually just keep that the same. And then in future things, you'll see that usually when you write the stem, you will always write it long and low. But we're not going to follow that pattern now because I think for beginning Tlingit, I say don't worry about that a whole lot. Just look at it and just remember, like, because that one's short and high, I'll keep it short and high.
Hune.
Ah,
Sorry, the k, which means area, is how is that used again? As far as like maybe you could give me some more examples because I know it's in kusti and kudziti, and I still can't quite grasp its meaning.
okay. We got to switch over to this end. Always ask questions. Don't say sorry. Just ask the question. Okay, we're all here to learn.
My favorite.
So this k is a really interesting thing. And it's probably one of these things that if you ask someone who's spoken Tlingit their whole life, what does k mean? I don't know how they're going to answer that. Because they know the whole language. But k is one of these little things that I like to just really sort of examine. I think there's probably 2 different ones. There's k, which means it's referring to some given space. There might even be 3 different ones. The second one, k, means people as an object. I love people. I don't love people. So take your pick. Well, that one is the space one, which is really tricky. It's really tricky. So this ḳ, the main one that we're going to focus on, it really refers to a given space. Once you put it in front of a verb, like you have yati to be, siti to be a member of a group, ḳudziti to exist, to live. So it has something to do with like a given space. But it's really interesting because sometimes you put it on a verb and suddenly you're just talking about the weather now. Sa'at, it's cold. Qusi'at, the weather's cold. Ah, it's hot. Quwatah, the weather's hot. So sometimes it just switches something to just talk about the weather. However, I believe it's the same one in these three words, and you could put all of these before a verb, which is really wild. So first of all, you have ḳ, which in this form is usually a high tone, but sometimes it goes low. I don't fully understand. But there's these four suffixes on here, and we're going to learn all about suffixes. But this one, nach, means through something or along it, via, through or along. Anybody know what dach is?
Away from.
Away from, right? From. Anybody know what day is? Towards. Anybody know what T is?
Around.
There is one that is around, but this
Arrive at?
is at and arriving at, right? So there's four different ways to say at, right? This is one of them, maybe three. So if you were going through ḳ, you have ḳunach. That's where that word comes from. It's wild. And that translates to really. If you're coming from ḳ, you have ḳudach or ḳutch. Kaudli itchi ḳutchayanaha. And that's too much. Ḳutchayanaha. They move too much, can't count them. That's where it comes from. Ḳudē is not used very often, but if you're going towards ḳ, you're going into oblivion. Ḳudēwudagud. The moon is eclipsed. And if you arrive at ḳ, it's lost. Ḳutwugud. Another one. I said earlier, I think when I was speaking Lingít, I forgot somebody's name. And I was like, my friend. And then I remembered their name. Then I said their name. I said, I almost forgot their name. But you could say forgot, like a which is a standard way to say I forgot. But I was also working with elders, and when they would forget something that they knew, that they felt like they should know, like someone's name, their friend's name, they'd say, I threw it and it got lost. It's literally what it means. But what was wild, visiting with Ḳáalḥáawu, Nora Daumenhauer, Keishi came to visit her for the first time after Nora lost her husband. And I did a thing. I said, because I was making a movie about Nora, and I said, are you guys okay if I film this, and can I film you from the moment you walk in the door? So I had to send a microphone out for Keishi, and then she came and knocked on it, because I wanted to see how they greeted each other, even though it was such an emotional moment, but we don't know how to do that stuff in the language all the time. How do you comfort somebody? We need to know how to do this kind of stuff. And so there was a point where Nora said, well, I think Ḳáalḥáawu said, Wasaya atnanini'in. What's up with you? And Nora, I think she responded, I'm just me here. Then she said, but but I just lost my husband. But she said as if she did it. And I was just watching because I was like, I don't know how the people talked about this stuff. But now you've got the people. And it was really wild to just listen to them. And she was saying, Ťaḥuasa, ťaḥuasa, hastu etinach yehayati, yahachana. We really need them, our partners. And it's sad, and it was, but it was really important to sort of see how people talk about these things. So coming back to that's I think it has quite a few of these, the big question types of things. And as a second language learner, there are things to think about, but don't get lost in it, because then you'll forget to just learn the language, use the language. It's one of these things to just be fascinated about, keep an eye on when you see it pop up in these verbs. So, you folks need something to do over the weekend. What do you think? I think you gotta make some sentences, you gotta make something to share. Tuesday, any suggested topics?
A story of our weekend, or just a story that we can create, like a 10-sentence story or something.
Maybe something about some of our relatives.
Yeah, okay. How about a short story involving a relative? It doesn't have to be anything big. It doesn't have to be the birth or beginning of anything, some big. Don't go for the big clan migrations. Small day-to-day stuff, right? Maybe something funny. Maybe something, whatever you're feeling, but just sort of capturing that. Feel free to reach out. There will be a big email coming this weekend talking about how we can all communicate a little bit more. I might be getting in trouble because I'm trying to just smoosh everyone together, but they say not everybody can know everybody's information, blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, figure it out, navigating those waters. But I think it would be good. And also, I'm trying to transform the base camp so that that can also be a question and answer thing. You got a question, you can ask it there. You can always email me stuff, but then the nice thing that I really like language questions to be in front of all the people, because someone else might have that same question, or it answers it for them already. Like, how do I say, I have 3 kids? I think it's naski nachawe achyetki. Not even a verb there. I don't know if I mentioned that already. Any last minute thoughts, questions?
Is your Nora movie, is that on your YouTube?
Yes, it's 2 hours long. It's called Language Warriors. I don't know how to edit a movie, so it's just this long strings of shots.
When you were talking about Keishi, was it Keishi Basikuli?
Yes. And yeah, it started, I love working with Richard and Nora. They were so wonderful. I don't know what they did. Like, I think he was up in his office all the time. She was just downstairs. I think that because I would call and he would always answer the phone. I was like, I got a language question. Need to know how to say 3-legged dog. I was like, okay. And then Nora they usually answered the phone at the same time when I called. And I would talk to both. It was so much fun. But I got this grant and I bought some film equipment and I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do it, but I'm going to make a movie of you two. Because who's going to tell your story? Because they'd share all this stuff about all this language documentation, making all this stuff. And then it was through the Alaska Humanities Forum, who are wonderful. But there was a bit of a mix-up because somebody, they got a new job and someone else took over, and then they had the wrong grant amount and blah, blah, paperwork. So it got delayed. The whole thing got delayed like 4 or 5 months. Finally got the gear, wrote an email to Richard Dowenhauer. I said, I got this grant. We're going to make this movie. I'm so excited. And he says, well, I've been working on this letter. And he sent me this letter saying, I'm dying of cancer. And everything stopped. And I said, man, why did it get delayed? Why, But I called him. And I said, you know what? We don't have to do this if you guys don't want to. But also, maybe it's a thing that distracts us from this other stuff. And it's important, too, that who's going to know what you guys have done? So he said, okay, well, I'll talk to Nora. And then they talked, and they said, oh, yeah, let's do it. So I set up, and I filmed one session with them. Kathy Reddy was there. She really helped with this whole thing. And when we sat down, we just turned the camera on, and nobody knew what to say. Nobody knew what to do. It was too intense. So then we sort of stopped, and I said, okay, let's map out an idea. Tell me what got you guys started with this work. And then they went through it. And several scenes where Nora's very emotional, everybody knows what's going on. But that's the undercurrent of the whole thing. And so the film is mostly Nora, me having conversations with her, and a few other people who come in to visit. But it turned into a movie about how she dealt with losing her husband. And I filmed them for this one interview, which is sliced up through the film, because that was the only time I got the chance to film him before he... But it was powerful. Then I think the last thing we did, because we were so kind of drained, I said, tell me some funny stuff. Tell me the funny things that happened while you guys were doing this work. And they did, and some of it was really fun. We'll end on this. The funny stuff, because it's sad. It's very sad. The first story they ever worked on was in Tesla. They went up to record Ḳaalḵáawu Tom Peters, who knew an amazing amount of stories. On the way up, they recorded my great-grandpa and my great-grandma who were living in Skagway. So they record Tom Peters, who tells a story, the woman who offended the bears. And then they came back and they worked on it for like a whole year. Wrote down all the Lingít, translated into English. They go back up there and they said, okay, we want to read this story to you to see if we got it right. So they read, and it was long. And I think Richard Dowenhauer read it. They got done, and Tom Peters said, I didn't know you speak Lingít like that. That's amazing. He's like, no, these were your words. This is your story. And he says, well, that's a great story. Let me tell you how it ends. Because when he was recording it, he started singing this song. And then I think he must have just got maybe a little distracted. And everybody was so excited that they probably just stopped the tape. And it didn't. It wasn't actually the end of the story. And so in the second half, he was sitting in his home and there was a baby. He's like, hey, baby. You know, you can hear him talk to the baby. He's like trying to give it stuff because the baby's crying. He's trying to keep it distracted. And we listened to this. It's like I found the two recordings and I put them together. And we listened to them in Tesla. And it was fun because people were saying, I think I know who that baby is, right? And so it was really amazing. But at one point, Richard said, it was fun. But then I thought, well, he said, it's such a great story. Let me tell you how it ends. He's like, if you're the greatest pianist in the world, who do you listen to? Who did he listen to when they told stories? Because he was a master storyteller. So it was a fun project. Yeah, it's called Language Warriors. It's got quite a bit of Lingít in there. You also can hear this Nora talking about what it was like to get started doing this work. And she had some moments where she was just on fire. Just really on fire in terms of talking about why to do this and how to do this. So. Yeah.
Tom Peters is my great-great-great-grandfather.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah.
I played it for his daughter when she was alive.
Yeah.
And
I actually studied a couple of different versions of his story, and the interesting part is he has different endings for different stories of who he told the story to.
wow.
Yeah, one is like a really hardcore ending, everyone
His
dies.
bank kills him?
Yeah, and another one, the bear gets away with her kids into the mountains.
Wow.
And only like 2 out of the 3 brothers die, but in one version they all die. I was like, who did he tell the story to? Because it's interesting, same storyteller, but alternate endings.
There's a couple other versions we have from different storytellers, so putting them together, I'm pretty sure she comes back, turns back into a human, And then her brother wants to pretend hunt her children, and she didn't want him to, but then he talks her into it, and for whatever reason she sees him using real arrows. So she turns herself back into a bear and goes and kills him, and then takes her kids and leaves. That's also, I think, the version from Nakatlan, Frank Dick, who's from Yakutat. But if you line them up as well, because they're so similar, those stories, it's really neat.
Yeah, like Animal Mother, they're so similar in different parts, and
Yeah.
it's cool to see that because there's lots of stories that have songs within them too, which is really cool. I love Lingit songs, stuff. But yeah, cool.
Okay. Okay, I might have missed some questions in the chat. Sorry, did I miss anything? Everybody clear? Write a short story involving a relative or multiple relatives.
I don't know if it'd be helpful for anybody else, but I think it'd be great if maybe you had like that thing you just said, your assignment, if that was in Tlingit. So we could see how you put the language together.
Uski shkashnik kaishihit yatleka in ak adat. But I guess maybe not in ak. In ak would be like one of your siblings or your parents. Uski khunkiyan adat ka ikaniyan. Chakuni naksait wasaku. Uski shkashnik, little story. Kaishihit. Y'all write it. You know, we'll do it on this messy slide. We'll make another one. So we'll say usk is small, and then uski is a small, whatever the noun is. Shkashnik, story. Then we're going to say kai shahit, plural command form. You all write it. Ikhunkiyan, wash ikaniyan. I guess I'll say dot. I don't really say. I can say in, but that would sound wrong. So, ikhunkiyan. So your friend. Usually, a long time ago, they were the same moiety as you, because we all have moieties: eagle, raven, wolf, crow. So technically, your chunkiyan, if you were a wolf person, were the other wolf people. Ikaniyan is those would be the ravens. Then dot is about. Although it doesn't really have to be about them. It's a little tricky, because if I said in, which would be with, that means it sounds like you gotta get together with them and they gotta help you write it. So I'll just leave it as dot. Uskishkashnik kaishikit ichunkiyan gwash ikaniyanda. With your friends or maybe your opposite clan people. However many you want. Just some sort of kinship person, friend, whatever. Little story, doesn't have to be very long. And
Renee,
ah,
would it be okay if I did something that I could still tell story, but use something that I would do in the classroom?
sure.
Is that okay?
Yep.
Jeez.
And as you folks are working, feel free to put onto the base camp or email me if you're looking for, if you're stuck on something. Otherwise, just give it your best shot. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. When we share on Tuesdays, no one's correcting nothing. So don't worry about that. If you want me to look at it later, you can. Send it to me and if I don't send you anything in a day or two, give me a little reminder. It's too many emails come, but it's all good. Okay. ǨāЛḵáawu Yoo X. Benelchish, Johan.
Get it, Ogden. Yake Ghana.
Yakecha.
Would right now